This is my favorite salad dressing. It's my homemade mustard vinaigrette. I always keep this on hand in the fridge, and today I'm going to show you how I make it. But before we get into the ingredients, we need to talk about the container that you're going to make the salad dressing in. This is my preferred container. It's a very large Pyrex measuring cup, 8-cup measuring cup. And the main reason why it's such a good container for making this dressing is of how wide it is. You really need the container to be wide enough to give you enough room to move the whisk around so you can get a good emulsion between the oil and the vinegar. Here's a smaller measuring cup. This is a 4-cup measuring cup. And as you can see, the whisk barely fits in there, and there's hardly any room to move that whisk around to make the dressing. So I really prefer a much wider container to do this with. Here's another bowl that's kind of a shallow, wide bowl. This would work great. I've used this one many times. Additionally, a large plastic mixing bowl like this one works good too, and as you can see, it also has that spout on there. And if you're going to make a smaller batch, a nice wide soup bowl like this one would work good too. That's just barely enough room to get that whisk to move around, but I've successfully made dressing in this type of bowl as well. And one other thing that's going to help you tremendously with this is to have a large whisk. If you have one of these tiny whisks like this, getting an emulsion with the oil and vinegar is going to be just much more difficult. The bigger the whisk you can find, the better your results are going to be. So I'm going to start out with the vinegar. This is distilled white vinegar. This is the vinegar I like to use. It comes in right at about 5% acidity, as it says on the label there. You could also use apple cider vinegar. It has a slightly different flavor, pretty much the same acidity as the white vinegar. And of course other options would be, balsamic vinegar, or red wine vinegar, or white wine vinegar, and those are a little bit more acidic, but and they also have a unique flavor. But I prefer just the plain white vinegar for most of my salad dressings. But the key to getting the oil to vinegar ratio correctly is 3 to 1. You want 3 parts oil to 1 part vinegar. So for this batch, I'm going to start off with a half a cup of vinegar, and so with our 3 to 1 ratio, that means I'm going to need 1.5 cups of oil to go with that half a cup of vinegar. But the oil is going to be the last ingredient we put in. We're going to start off with some seasoning. And the first seasoning here is going to be stone ground mustard, any kind of mustard, whatever your favorite mustard is. I don't really measure the mustard, I just kind of glob some in there. It doesn't really matter that much. First I'm going to go with some salt and pepper. And I'm not measuring these seasonings, I'm just kind of adding just a little bit in. You can experiment with this as you make yours, make it a little saltier or less salty, whatever you think. But I just start light. You can always add more salt later. Next ingredient is garlic powder. Just sprinkle a garlic powder in there. Next up is onion powder. A little dash of lemon pepper. A little bit of oregano. I don't put very much oregano in there. It's a pretty powerful flavor, and it could easily take over the dressing if you put too much. Just a pinch. Same goes with the basil. These dried herbs are very powerful flavored, so just a pinch of basil. And this is Badia Complete Seasoning. This is a kind of a seasoning mix that has garlic and shallots and basil and parsley and has a variety of things. I really haven't found anything that this seasoning is not good on. It's just good on everything. And I'm going to sprinkle a little of that in here as well. If you don't have it, just skip it. Next is a little bit of ground mustard. This will just add some more color than flavor, but it has a good flavor too. And finally, I'm going to put in a little bit of dill, too. I like the dill flavor, again, just a little bit with these dried herbs. So I also wanted to mention, regarding the seasonings, as you saw, I put in a whole bunch of different seasonings in this dressing, and they're absolutely not necessary. If you don't have some of those seasonings, just skip it. And honestly, this would still be a good dressing with just the mustard, the salt and pepper, and the vinegar and oil. Now we're ready for the oil, and I like to use canola oil. Primarily just because it has very little flavor. It's just a very mild flavor. But you can use olive oil if you want. Use whatever olive oil you like. The olive oil that if I do use olive oil, I usually use this kind that's very light and has an extra light taste. And as I showed you before, we put in a half a cup of vinegar. That means we're going to need 1.5 cups of oil. And my oil bottle here has measurements on it. And there's 8 ounces in a cup. As you can see, I'm just putting in a steady stream of oil out of my squirt bottle there. If you're doing it with a measuring cup, pouring it in, just pour it in slowly in a stream. You don't need to drip it real slowly, just a slow stream. And I think the key with the whisk here is just to hold the whisk loosely with your hand. If you're gripping the whisk really tightly, or tensing up your arm really tightly while you're whisking this, your arm's going to get tired really quickly. So just hold the whisk loosely and move it around with your wrist and your elbow, and it should be able to get this whisked up no problem without your arm getting tired out. Now you may have noticed that I didn't put any sugar in this salad dressing. And you can certainly add sugar or honey or anything you want to sweeten it up, but I don't do that. I mean, I think if you're going to do that, you might as well just buy the store-bought salad dressing that's full of sugar. I just didn't see any reason to ruin a perfectly good salad dressing by dumping a bunch of empty calories in there. But hey, if you like sugar in your salad dressing, by all means, it's your salad dressing. Do it how you like. But I'm not putting any sugar in. And I'm fast forwarding through this mixing process, but and looking at the video here that I recorded, all in all, from the time I started whisking until I got all the oil in, it was right at about 5 minutes. I have tried making this dressing with the food processor and a blender, and I just find the results are just more reliable this way. I just get mixed results with the food processor. I mean, it'll still make an edible dressing, but many times when I use the machine method, I'll find that I'll come back the next day and see that the dressing is separated, and it's just, I'll have to, it's not a big deal. You just have to shake it up every time you want to have some. It's just nicer this way. I pretty much get a perfect emulsion almost every time, just manually with a whisk. Plus, it's less dishes to wash. You don't have to wash all those parts of the food processor, so that's a bonus. And all the oil's in now. As you can see, it's thickened up nicely. I'll go ahead and put a spoon in there. Do a little spoon test here. As you can see, it's sticking to the spoon. It's nice and thick. You can see all the herbs and seasonings that are suspended in the dressing. It's looking good. So the next thing is to put it in the container that you're going to store it in. And I like to use these old salad dressing bottles from grocery store salad dressing. These are some nice glass bottles that I saved from the grocery store salad dressing. But you can just use whatever containers you have on hand. A mason jar works good. I've used a mason jar many times before. Otherwise, a Tupperware with a lid will work just fine too. You can just spoon it out of there. Or even just a bowl with saran wrap on it would be fine too. But this is really where having a container with the spout on it comes in handy, is when it's time to pour it in, especially if you're going to pour it into a narrow mouth container like this bottle here. But I'm just going to go ahead and pour that into these bottles. And there you go. There's my favorite homemade mustard vinaigrette dressing. This will easily last a few months in the fridge, no problem, but I've never had it last that long. It's always gone from my fridge within a couple of weeks. And this dressing is good fresh right when you make it, but if it does sit for a few days, the flavors really develop a little bit more as those herbs and seasonings kind of blend together, and then those dried herbs rehydrate in the dressing. Well, flash forward to the next day, I'll show you how I like to use this dressing. I'm going to make a salad for lunch. I'm going to start out with some homemade coleslaw. This is just shredded carrots and cabbage. I have a video on how I make that if you want to check that out. But in with that slaw, I'm going to add some sliced red onion. And I'm going to go ahead and cube up a cucumber, put that in the bowl. And I got a few pieces of grilled chicken left over from the night before. Dice those up. In they go. And in comes the mustard vinaigrette dressing. Like I said, this is my favorite salad dressing. I eat it almost every day, either for a main salad for a meal or just a side salad for dinner. But feel free to take this recipe and build on it, make it your own, adjust it to your personal tastes. I hope you found that useful. Thanks for watching. I appreciate it. See you on the next one.